What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training. Today, we're going to be breaking down some incorrect versus correct examples of quarterback throwing mechanics. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you are a QB and would like to train with us this offseason, we're going to be traveling out to 7 more states across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver camps. Next up on our camp tour, we'll be coming out to Boston. That camp is completely sold out, but then we will be heading out to Cleveland, Austin, Texas, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles. So if you guys are local to one of those cities and would like to train with us for 2 whole days, fellas, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you there. Let's get started with this video. So how this video is going to work out is I'm going to show an incorrect example of some random quarterback with bad throwing mechanics. So not necessarily bad throwing mechanics, but a bad habit that will lead to flawed throwing mechanics. Then I'm going to show a professional example of them doing it correctly and how you guys can avoid this bad habit. So this first example here is going to be of a quarterback who has an overstride. So a lot of quarterbacks, I think every quarterback knows that when you guys go to throw, you don't want this like overly wide base. You don't want your feet super wide outside your shoulders. You don't want to stand like you're on some kind of surfboard. Where you want to be is you want your back foot to be underneath your shoulder, or as I like to say, underneath the hip. Because when you are loaded on your back leg, that allows you to transfer more. That allows you to get more drive off of your back leg, get your hips to rotate through easier, which takes pressure off the arm. However, in your throwing sequence, the first part that has to get down is your front stride. If your front stride doesn't get down, that is pretty much like being in a very wide base. So a lot of quarterbacks will get to this position, but what they will do is they will push off of this back foot instead of just simply thinking about getting the front foot down. You want to be loaded on your back leg. You guys want to think step down with the front foot. As you step with the front foot, you want to keep your shoulders back. You want to take the football back, and then we rip through with my hips. The throwing sequence should be stride, hips, then the shoulders and ball come through. It should be 1, then 2, then 3, starting from the ground up. Now, when you push off of this back leg, being in this very like kind of narrow base, balanced base, that creates this long stride. So you see how when this quarterback throws, it takes him a while to get the front foot in the ground. So when the front foot does strike, because it steps super far, you see where his back foot ends up, very wide outside of his frame. So when your feet are this wide, this prevents you from rotating at your hips. So like all of you could try this right now. Stand up and have your feet crazy wide. Now try to rotate at your hips. You probably can't do it. It's going to be difficult because you're just simply in an unbalanced, super wide position. So what ends up happening with the throwing sequence now is the front foot gets down, the hips are a non-factor, so the shoulders end up coming through before the hips do. So you see how the shoulder plane is here, the back foot trails, the back hip isn't rotating through simply because of the long stride. Now, to be able to get power, because he is throwing at this type of target right here, your power as a quarterback comes from rotation. Now, you're either going to rotate from one of 2 areas, either your hips or your shoulders. So if you're not rotating at your hips because you have that long stride, quarterbacks like to either pull their front elbow down, dip their head, rip open their shoulders as a source of power. Now, the only problem with that source of power is it's an inconsistent source of power because your body falls off of something called a midline. And your midline is where you get your accuracy from. And we're going to continue to talk about this with the other examples of bad mechanics throughout this video. So what ends up happening here is you see how he dips the head, dips the elbow, and pulls everything through. Well, that's going to pull your release off the midline, and it's going to widen outside of your body frame. Being consistent and being accurate on a throw all comes from extension. You want to be able to extend your release right where we want to put this target, which in this case is right here in this circle. So your arm wants to literally extend and flick straight at the target. Now, I cannot extend and flick if my elbow is pulling down, if my head is leaning, because my arm, you see how his arm comes across his body like so, with the palm facing upward. That is all this based on this long stride because it prevents the hip rotation. All of it. It's like a cause and effect, fellas. And the cause and effect, 99% of the time, happens from the lower body having that long stride. So, fellas, when we go to throw, it's very easy for a quarterback coach, too, to say, oh, well, hey, just don't dip your head and don't pull your elbow. Keep your hand up by your face and keep your head straight. But if you're not using your hips and your shoulders are staying very, very compact, you're going to feel like you have absolutely no power. And now I want you guys to watch where the ball misses on this. He's trying to put the ball in the middle of the target. I want you to see where the ball misses. It misses to the right and it's dying. And you see how his toe kind of over rotates, shoulder over rotates. And that's all based on the shortened stride because it pulls us off my throwing sequence. If he would have gotten to that position pre-throw and the stride got down right now, those hips could be able to rotate through, the shoulders and the football would trail behind, and he wouldn't need to dip his head, pull his elbow, and his arm would have been in a more consistent spot. So I'm going to play this again full speed one more time, and then we're going to break down this example from Tom Brady. So, and again, it's obviously a little bit unfair to compare, a high school quarterback, middle school quarterback to the greatest quarterback of all time. However, mechanically, isn't this what we should all want to strive for, right? We all should want to strive for having perfect throwing mechanics, and that's what Brady has. And you look at film from Brady early in his career, his motion changed a lot over time by these key things that we're talking about right now. So let's look at Brady's base here. So he's in this good position with his back leg. It's underneath his shoulder. It's underneath his hip. His knee isn't like caved in. His feet aren't super wide. He's in a good base. So now, what was the first part of that throwing sequence? Stride had to get down, then the hips had to go through, then the shoulders and the ball had to trail through. And you see how Brady, hand stays up here, his elbow's not pulling down, his head's not dipping, his shoulder isn't over rotating. He's able to keep his head steady, his hand up by his collarbone, and his shoulders and hips square to the target. So what does that allow us to do? That allows us to keep my arm on the midline, and we could get to what? Extension. Not coming across my frame, we can extend to the target. And that's where your accuracy comes from. But again, it starts from the ground up. Your throwing sequence is 1, then 2 at the hips, then 3 with the extension in the ball. So let's break this down. So again, good base. Now what happens first? He strides. He steps down. You guys don't want to think of it like you're pushing to the target. You don't want to think of it like you're stepping to the target. Think of it like your weight is loaded on the back leg and you are stepping down. The step is separate from the back leg. So I'm loaded, I step, and as I step, my hands and my front shoulder goes back. Because now, when my shoulder rotates, the front foot is down. The next part to come through is the hips. But I can only do that if I'm in a good base pre-throw and the stride isn't long. Because you see how his feet stay underneath his frame. It's not this long stride and the back leg extends out. So now watch what happens. He starts to transfer that weight. He's driving off the back quad, shifting weight to his front quad. Front hip is opening up, and you see how the hip is coming through before the ball. Now, why is all this important? It's going to help you be more accurate because you won't need to dip your head. You won't pull your elbow. It's going to give you more velocity because you're using your legs, your hips, and your core instead of relying on just all arm. And using your legs, your hips, and your core is going to take pressure off of your arm. We want to throw with zero pressure on my arm. We want to be able to just let my body make this throw and the arm just kind of trails behind. And that's exactly what Brady does, which allows him to get to that good extension point. So fellas, all of those things were solely predicated by that long stride. Let's play this one more time, full speed. Fellas, your throwing mechanics start from the ground up. So now we're going to look at this other example here from this quarterback, and he has kind of this like sidearm motion. Now, this is not that good, quote unquote. You see all these quarterback coaches out there talking about arm slots, inventing arm slots, quote unquote. And a lot of quarterbacks take it the wrong way. And they think that, oh, it's okay to throw sidearm way outside of my frame and come across my body. That is not the case, fellas. You have to be stable with your front side, level with your head, have the right throwing sequence rather than, oh, I'm just going to try to throw sidearm. If you want a lower arm slot and you want that quicker whip to your arm slot, you got to stay compact at the front side. But so many guys don't have the knowledge of this, so they neglect it. They don't talk about keeping a disciplined front side when trying to change up the arm slot. And that's what this quarterback, I'm not saying that's what he's thinking. I'm just saying that that's what a lot of quarterbacks think out there. So let's watch when this guy goes to throw. He's got his weight back. He's in a good position. He's taking the football back like he should be, but on the foot strike, he doesn't overstride, I would say. He has improper weight distribution. So let's talk about that last example of Brady, right? Remember, he's loaded on his back leg. You want to think step, but your weight stays back, right? You step, but your weight stays loaded on the back leg. So you can transfer through and have your hips come through, and that front shoulder closing when the foot strike happens times up my throwing motion. However, when this front foot gets down, this quarterback, all of his weight gets to his front side. Even though it's not a long stride, he's not overstriding, all of his weight is on the front half of his body when the front foot comes down. So his sequence is going to be off. You guys want to stride, then have the hips go through. But if you stride and at the same time you're like pushing off your back foot, the push off the back foot shifts your weight forward, there's no coil. Your throwing sequence is still going to be flawed. And you see how his shoulders end up coming through before his hips do, right? His shoulders are here, back hip and back foot are trailing behind. And that's solely because his weight is going forward too quickly. He's not staying back on the foot strike, then transferring through. Remember, you step separate from the back leg drive, but he is stepping at the same time as the back leg drive. His front shoulder is ripping open because it has no choice because all his weight's going forward, and that makes that arm exit outside of his frame. And watch what his release does. He comes across, and you see how his shoulders and hips are facing this way. That's the sidearm that doesn't let us get to extension, fellas. We need to get to extension on the throw, and I need the right timing of my throwing sequence. Everybody knows to take a short stride. Everybody knows to rotate at their hips, but it's the timing of everything that makes all the difference. So let's show this second example here, because some of you, this might seem a little confusing, and this next example is going to help you. But we do not want everything going forward at the same time. We want there to be a delay. I get loaded on my back leg, about 70%. You step separate from the back leg push. Your weight remains on the back leg. Your shoulders rotate back. As the front foot goes down, then we transfer through. So let's look at this throw here from Anthony Richardson. Again, one of the top quarterbacks coming out of the draft this year. T-shirt and shorts. He's probably one of the best guys I've probably ever seen throw the football. T-shirt and shorts. In a game situation, it's a little bit different. Obviously, that's different for everybody. But all of these guys, these NFL guys, they come out in T-shirt and shorts to a regular training session. They make it look so damn easy. It's one of those things where it comes off the hand so easy. If you're a third stringer in the NFL, you make this stuff look easy. And that's the mechanical stuff we want to try to strive for, fellas. So why does he throw this ball so good? Why does he have such a whip to the throw? So let's take a look here. Weight is loaded on the back leg. So now, what's the next part, or what's the first part of the throwing sequence? Stride, and as the stride gets down, we need to remain loaded on my back leg and my shoulders need to close. I do not want that stride to get down the same time I'm driving off my back leg and all my weight ends up forward. I want there to be a separation. So you see how he strides? But look where his weight is. His weight stays back. And look where his hands go. His hands stay back. So now, the second part of the throw is that hip snap. So he strides, hips go through, and you see how the hip goes through before the shoulders do? And look at his release point. His release point is inside of his frame, fellas. And again, he's got like maybe a little bit wider of an arm slot. This is fine. It doesn't need to be a perfect 90, but I don't want it way out here either because all your weight is screaming forward and we're over-rotating. We need there to be a delay, fellas. You stride, we stay back, then the hips snap me through, and you see how when he finishes shoulders and hips parallel to the target. And that is what keeps your release inside your frame. When you take this front shoulder and front hip and swing way open, that's what widens the arm. And the swing way open, again, there's a cause and effect to everything. The swing way open is when all your weight pushes forward. We stay back on the stride and then snap through with my hips. That makes it very easy to stay square, very easy to extend at my release point. You see how he's finishing through and actually following through, unlike the last example. But when you look at this first example, again, like I said, when that foot strike happens, you see how all the weight is coming forward, fellas. We want, again, when that front foot gets down, I want to be loaded on the back leg. I don't want to be pushing forward because when I push forward, that makes that shoulder, that hip swing, and you see how the arm is exiting the frame. He's coming across his body, not extending and finishing through. Fellas, there's got to be that delay to your motion. We have to make sure that we are always on sequence with my throws. Stay back on the stride, then let's snap that thing all the way through. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you'd like to come out and train with us in 7 different states this off-season, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season camps. I'll see you guys next time.